Welcome to Inspire Campfire, a podcast where ordinary people tell their stories of extraordinary adventure. These are campfire stories meant to inspire the rest of us to light the fire within, get outside, follow our dreams, and return to tell our own stories. Ready? Let's strike the match.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Scott Wurzbacher, and today we're talking about how a lifetime of experiences can quietly build the confidence to create something of your own. My guests today are Tom Weiser and Kevin Murphy from Wales, United Kingdom, and they are co-founders of Nerpa Travel. Before starting Nerpa, both Tom and Kevin spent years out in the world earning their stripes through real adventure. They both worked for the Adventurists, helping run the legendary Mongol Rally, which has been called the greatest road trip in the world, where participants drive old cars from the UK to Mongolia. Along the way, they learned how to navigate uncertainty, logistics, and the kind of challenges you cannot plan away. Tom and Kevin became fast friends, and they combined their individual origin stories, their shared experiences, and their belief that adventure travel could be done differently. Nerpa blends strong structure with real freedom. There's intention and framework, but also room for surprise, spontaneity, and discovery. In this conversation, we talk about their journeys, how they came together, and how those experiences shaped the company they run today. I am so excited to share this story with you. Kevin, Tom, welcome to the campfire.
Thank you very much. We've been excited about this.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. Can I say that introduction, you've basically summed us up in a way that we never could. And I need to borrow that for our website.
And scene.
Absolutely, but I stole a lot of it from your website. So there you go. It's a team effort here. I love it. Guys, let's just jump right in for listeners that might not be familiar. What is Nerpa Travel?
Kevin?
Well, Nerpa Travel, it started out as a bit of a hobby during... the best time to start a travel company is during the coronavirus pandemic.
Yes. So
we thought, we'll start something in preparation for when tourism blows up again on the other side of this. And, we do have experience in adventure travel, but we've always wanted to do things more sustainably and more conscious, throughout the experiences. And then we landed on Nerpa, and we've had lots of ideas floating around our heads, and we've finally started pinning things down, and we've now done 2 events so far, and we've got another 3 on the horizon.
Love it. So tell me about the events that you guys have already done.
So I guess the first full event was the Vietnam motorbike event. We did an initial, sort of recce edition of it in partnership with a wonderful American travel company called Lost Travel. We are at a place where, mine and Kevin's background is very much event management, sort of building the trip and making it possible, not so much the sort of the salesy side of things. Mm-hmm. So when they approached us and we shared this idea with them, they had the community, they had the bums on seats, and we just had to make it happen. So yeah, we did that the first ever, at the time, and still is, the world's first and only electric motorbike adventure. So that was in Vietnam between Ho Chi Minh City and Da Nang. And then that, following on from the great success of that, we actually posed a question to the group where me and Kevin had to give our 2 visions of what the next event should be that we organise. And we decided that we wanted to do a sort of conventional cycling event. Yeah. I pitched Wales because I wanted to do an event in Wales. I love Wales. And Kevin pitched Ireland because, as you might be able to tell from his surname, he's thoroughly Irish. And the group voted for Wales. And so last year we organised a 6-day mountain bike event across Wales. Again, exploring parts of the country that we love that otherwise people don't get to see. Yeah, so those are the 2 events. And then off the back of that, we were fortunate enough to be able to set ourselves up full-time as, the Nerpa Travel team, and hand in our notices to our various jobs and really hit the ground running, because it had been a long few years of it being a hobby job and using our paid time off to do these trips, and working on it 5 days a week is just it's the dream. It's the dream.
It is, and it's so cool. You guys are in the thick of building something great. You guys have already made so much progress. But I think what I love, Tom, you and I got a chance to talk last week, and what I just love about your story is really the adventure that your whole background around adventure and the way that you've kind of come to this point, because you guys bring a confidence to Nerpa Travel that a lot of people don't have. And it's based on, as I said, earning your stripes and the experiences that you've developed. And that's really what I'm excited for listeners to hear about, is just the story of how you guys came to be to where you are today. So I wonder, like, if we could do each one of you guys individually, because, you guys both have your own adventure stories. And so, Tom, let's start with you. Can you give us a little bit of background on how you came to this point?
I think probably the most pivotal moment in sort of terms of how I got here, aside from working in the industry, was when I finished. So I'm really conscious whether to use English terms or sort of North American terms. So I'll use one of them. So when I finished high school, it's really it's quite traditional in the UK that you'll take a year out of education before you go to university or college.
Yeah.
We call it a gap year. And by the time I got to the age of 18, I was done with school. I wanted some time out. And I decided I want to take a year out. My parents were really against it. But in the end, they said, if you want to go, do something that is at least going to be valuable for you going forward or throughout your life. So I said, I'll learn a language. I happened to watch a Russian film at some point in that year. And it was the first time I properly heard Russian. I was a bit interested in sort of Russian history and politics. But as soon as I heard it, I just knew, that's the language. So got a couple of jobs, booked a place in Russia, saved up some money, moved to St. Petersburg in January, which is the worst time of year to move to St. Petersburg. I didn't see the sun for a month. And then I went to a language school and I studied Russian, and then subsequently came back, did my degree. It was during my degree that I got into like bicycle touring.
Okay.
And that's sort of really changed the way that I interacted with travel, because I think previously travel had just been a vacation and you don't really explore. And then, I just by happenstance, I moved to Bristol and happened to move into a house share where Kevin and his partner were living. There was about 15 people living in this house or something like that. And I turned up and Kev was looking for volunteers to work at the finish line of the Mongol Rally, which was then finishing in Russia. And I was like, I speak Russian, I can come out. And that was it, really. We just sort of went from there. Isn't
that crazy? You literally watched a movie in Russian and something connected you to that language and said, that's the language and I'm gonna choose. And then you find yourself in this place where that became an in for this next adventure with the Mongol Rally.
Yeah. But sometimes I think it's really easy for people to because we love to link things as humans and create narratives. So I'm really sort of cautious to say that it was fate.
Yeah.
Sometimes it just feels a little bit too good to be true. Happenstance is, anyway.
I love it. So I want to pause you there and Kevin, bring us up to speed on your journey to that point.
So I did the gap year. I did the very basic, Southeast Asia experience. And mine was because I watched The Beach. It's not as, as deep as whatever Russian film Tom
Leo.
watched. With Leo, yeah. So DiCaprio sent me on my way. And I did, I think it was 5 months out in Southeast Asia, did a gap year. And then I came back to the UK to study marine and natural history photography, which is essentially wildlife photography. And that's how I wanted to travel, was wildlife. I wanted to dive and see the world that way. But unfortunately, during university, I got diagnosed with epilepsy, so I could no longer dive. So I had to look into other ways of getting some adventure in.
Yeah.
And, towards the end of university, you and your partner realized that you were just in a relationship because you were at university. So I moved to London and found out about the Mongol Rally and convinced 2 of my friends to go. I was purely luggage because, again, because of the condition, I don't drive. So yeah, we participated in the Mongol Rally, and because I'm loud and obnoxious and said, I'm going to make a movie about this and brought my camera, I must have been on the radar. And then I moved to Bristol because Bristol is essentially the Hollywood of wildlife TV. So you've got the BBC Natural History Unit. David Attenborough makes all of his stuff here.
Okay.
So yeah, it's all very condensed. So I moved here, and you know, that's where I was going to try and get out in the world, was work in wildlife TV and then travel. And I was working in post-production in TV, which is, you know, if you're an assistant in that position, is one of the most mind-numbing jobs you could possibly have. And then I saw a job appear on my Facebook, which was at the Adventurists for an entry-level role. And I lived about a 15, 20-minute walk from the front door. So I went, CV in hand, and I was like, hey, remember me? And because I was the most recent person they knew that did the Mongol Rally, it was like, yeah, all right, come work here. After a while, I moved into a house, and then I have this intelligent cyclist, Russian-speaking man show up and save my ass in Russia, basically.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So you guys are brought together here. I want to hear about the Mongol Rally because I've heard the term before, but I don't really know that much about it. So can you guys tell me a little bit about the Mongol Rally and even just like your experience with the Adventurists? But let's start with the Mongol Rally in particular. Can you, for people that aren't familiar, can you kind of give us an overview of what that experience is?
Yeah, so it's a 10,000-mile trip from initially the UK to Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, but as time went on, it went from Prague to Ulan-Ude in Russia, which is a day's drive north of Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia. You have to take a 1.2 litre car or smaller and just drive. You just have to head east. There's no backup, no support. So yeah, it's around 300 cars, 250 to 300 cars, up to 1,000 people, with the age range of 18 to 87 was the biggest gap we had on 1 year, and 45 nationalities. So it's a big beast. And having participated, I was like, this is the best thing I've ever done. And then the opportunity to go and work on it a couple of years later, it was incredible.
Yeah.
Not without, losing a few hairs off the top of my head.
The Adventurists website calls it the greatest road trip of all time. You just said it was like the best thing you'd ever done. Can you share a little bit about like what happens along the way?
Because you're using a crap vehicle, it's almost encouraged to break down and rely on the kindness of strangers or be forced into it, because, you get flat tires and that's the last tire you've got. Or in my car's case, the clutch cable broke 7 times within 5,000 miles. So yeah, it's just the cars get absolutely destroyed, and then people have a really good time. Partners break up with each other. Friends stop talking to each other. Marriages happen. I met my partner on the rally. She moved to the UK from Australia. There's I owe my current situation to the Mongol Rally. Yeah, it is an amazing road trip. It really, really is. And it's a shame, unfortunately, due to the current state of the world, you can't get into Mongolia really from the UK or from the West, really, because you have to drive either through China or through Russia.
Hopefully that changes at some point. How long does that journey take?
I mean, it would be anything. I think the quickest was 2 weeks.
2 weeks, okay.
But when Tom and I were out there, I think the quickest was maybe 3.5. And then there'd be some people arriving after we'd left, so it'd always be the second weekend of July that it started and finish on the first or second weekend of September. So it's a big old journey.
How many people are in your vehicle?
It can be one person up to 5, or however many you can fit in the car. We had 3, but some of the convoy that we were in had 4 out of 5 seats filled. Yeah, it gets very intense. And one of the things that you would tell people if they wanted to film on the trip was, even if your friend tells you to stop, keep filming, because that's when you get the best moments.
Yeah.
And it is, but then some people stop being friends afterwards. I know a few people personally that don't talk to each other anymore. So
that's great.
Me being one of them, actually.
I can imagine. I mean, the intensity. Are you stopping? Like, are you overnighting, or is this like? I mean, is this a race? Tell me about that.
It's the complete opposite of a race. It's as lost as you can get, really. That's the aim of the game, is take your time. And you're forced into it because of the type of vehicles you're taking. They're not built for the journey. Once you leave Europe, camping becomes more regular, but it's difficult to, just chuck a tent up somewhere in Europe en route.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was cheap hostels, tents, and then occasionally you'd get to treat yourself. If you're in a random town in the middle of Kazakhstan, you're like, oh my God, there's a 4-star hotel. They might actually have hot water. Let's go and stay there. And it's like $15 a night. And we're like, okay, yeah, let's treat ourselves for an evening. Let's not drink a bottle of vodka and we'll stay there. But it is the whole thing is a party. It's, a big community. And that's the main selling point, I think, is the very loyal audience, the cult of the Mongol Rally.
So it's a moving party. What that kind of goes 10,000 kilometers along this route. What are some of the terrain that you cover?
Anything you can think of. You've got the Pamir Highway, which is 4,500 meters, deserts, salt flats, muddy forests. It just anything you can think of, except I know there'd be snow in the Pamirs, but honestly, everything you can think of. You hit some coast, you go into the mountains, you hit the open plains of Mongolia, the deserts in Kazakhstan. And it's really weird as you're like driving through Mongolia and, you're so used to those like just slightly lumpy green hills. It almost looks like a golf course. After 2 days of that, you're just like, God, I just want to see something now. Like it's because it's so gradual. You become less impressed by things. Yeah. Really strange. It's a really strange feeling.
I understand. Yeah. Okay. So you participated in this thing and decided like, I loved this enough that I want to like help other people have this experience. And then Tom comes into the picture. So how was it like for you guys to be part of like the organizers of this and hosting this event for other people? Tom, let's go to you.
I think it's really important to caveat the sort of the process of working on the Mongol Rally with the fact that, yes, we got to spend 8, 9 weeks, 10 weeks a year in Russia doing cool stuff, drinking or partying all the time, hosting people, solving problems, being all sort of this sort of swashbuckling adventure manager, event manager person. What a lot of people don't see is the lists and lists of spreadsheets that we have to work through and all of the less glamorous side of the job. So I guess with the rally, you had sort of 3 distinct parts that we worked on. You had the big kickoff launch event, which when me and Kev were doing, we moved to Prague, which was insane. And I'll happily let Kev talk about that ad nauseum. Then you had you had a meetup party, which was effectively the last point at which teams would get together in Europe, because most teams we didn't really say, but there isn't a specific route on the rally, so teams are free to choose their own direction. But more often than not, people would go through Turkey. So southern Romania was a choke point for teams, would have an event there, and then the finish line party, which was in London there. So yeah, I guess our days when we got to Russia would have been set up the finish line, make sure everything was in place, make sure all of the various local partners were happy. So we'd have our parties, our gifts, our swag, working with local government, working with whoever we needed to get permissions from. And then teams would arrive, we would check them in, celebrate with them, and arrange for their cars to be shipped back to the European Union, because we didn't leave any cars in situ. Gotcha. And then that would just repeat for 8 weeks constantly. And we'd have weekly parties for all the teams that would come in. And it sounds really fun, and it was really fun, I should say that, but it's incredibly attritional. So not just like there's only so many days that you can be really happy and celebrate other people without it starting to sort of feel fake, or for you to get sort of emotional fatigue. So normally after about 5 or 6 weeks, me and Kev would have our natural peaks and troughs, and one of us would have to go off for a few days to sort of recharge and come back in. Yeah. It was the time of year that I looked forward to the most. So just I love going to Russia, and that part of Russia we're in Buryatia, is a fascinating region. You know, like I've got a degree in Russian history. I didn't know there were Buddhist republics in Russia. So when I got there, and everyone sort of, half the population looks, I guess, Mongolian, and there's loads of temples and datsans, and it was just a fantastic opportunity to learn about another amazing culture. And Lake Baikal is nearby, and yeah, it was just a joy. And you know, I like Kev met his partner there. I met my wife in London, got her back here. So yeah, it was incredible. But I think there were certain things that me and Kev tried to put an emphasis on that was sort of a little bit not above and beyond, but we still allowed, I guess, desire to help people to sort of shine through. And that would have been things like, you know, we set up a relationship with a local animal shelter, so that when the ralliers would finish, they'd quite often have a lot of consumables like dried pasta, dried noodles. We'd make sure that anything that could be given to animals would be sent over to the animal shelter. And the same goes for any camping equipment that the young people, the ralliers wouldn't want to take back with them. We had a relationship with a local scouts group.
Yeah, very cool.
All of that equipment too as well. So yeah,
very.
I mean, straight off the back of that, there's already two hilarious anecdotes I can think of with Tom. Is your daily battle with the wasps trying to access the consumable foods, and then when we went to the dog shelter to go and give the food, you know, because they wanted pictures and things like that, we turned up and it was like terrifying. It was Mad Max with dogs. Dogs on the roofs, on like just all of them barking. Then one of them bites Tom out of the kindness of their own heart. But that barely scratches the surface of the things that Tom and I went through out there.
We might need 3 more episodes to cover all of this.
We were saying we could write a book about our experience, because we did 4 years on the trot out there all summer. So it'd be start of August to end of July to mid-September every summer.
Hey everyone, it's Scott here. This podcast is a passion project for me because I absolutely love adventure. And it's thanks to the effort of my residential real estate team here in Charlotte, North Carolina, that many of you know as the W Realty Group, that this podcast gets funded. This awesome group of people have unmatched levels of competence and caring for our clients. If you know of anyone looking to buy or sell a home, our team serves the Charlotte, North Carolina market, but we can also help you find an agent anywhere throughout the US or Canada through our highly connected network. When you support our real estate business, you are also supporting this podcast. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your referrals. So you mentioned 8 weeks. Is this something that's like, is it like a continuous thing? Like what happened? Because I know you mentioned that like it takes 2 to 3 weeks to complete the rally. Are people starting?
2 to 3 weeks would be the quickest time. Yeah. The finish line would be open for an 8-week.
Got it. Okay.
And
cool.
people would just finish when they finish.
Got it.
And in fact, we'd encourage people not to finish quickly.
Got it. Okay.
And we'd sometimes chastise them for doing so.
That's super cool. So, because I want to get to what you guys are doing now, just to kind of round out. So while at your time with the Adventurists, the Mongol Rally is just one of the things that you guys did. What are some of the other events or places that you guys worked while you were with the Adventurists?
Well, it took us to a few places. Obviously, doing the Mongol Rally, it brought us to the Czech Republic because we ended up launching from Prague, because it just made sense for the European teams to meet there rather than drive all the way up to England, then have to get a boat back and then start from there. And then Romania was, as Tom said, was kind of choke point for where the ralliers split off. There was a monkey run, which used monkey bikes, which is a completely separate event in Romania. There was the same in Morocco, which again, there's I don't even want to pull the layers back on that one because I've still got trauma. And Peru was another location that we ran a monkey run. So between Tom and I, we ran 4 events, like live on the ground, and we'd either be out there to support one another. We ended up being a if one was going, the other one would go as well, for the most part.
Yeah, I gotcha. Tell me what a monkey run is.
So the monkey run was using a Chinese-made version of the Honda monkeys.
The monkey? Yeah.
The small 50cc motorbikes that go up to just past your knee, basically. And it would be a week-long trip on those. So Morocco was from the Sahara to the coast, or I don't know the route in Romania. That was Tom's deal.
That was the Ukrainian border to the Bulgarian border, so full length of the country.
Jeez. And then we did Peru Monkey Run, which was bonkers.
That was the high Andes down to the Amazon.
Yeah, the high Andes down to the Amazon basin, and it was a elevation difference of 4,500 meters again.
Yeah. I love the picture that you guys are painting for me, because I just feel, and you're going to have to validate me here, but I just feel that this has become like a lifestyle for you guys. Like, this is just the way that you guys live. And I think to so many people that are listening, it's probably just foreign, but all of these adventures that you guys have been on are just ingrained in you. And I'm seeing how it all kind of comes together to what you guys are working on now, between the bikes and the sort of road trip nature to what you guys are putting together in these unique locations. You guys have essentially become masters of logistics in foreign places, in new places. Can you just kind of round things out for us, and let's make the jump from your time at the Adventurists to how you guys kind of came together and you're finding yourself in a place where you're talking about, maybe we should do something and start our own thing.
Yeah, I mean, at the tail end of the Adventurists, I felt 2019 to 2020, I had my foot out the door anyway. I was like, all right, this is going to be my last year. And then you have a cool summer and you're like, I'll do one more. But I felt like I had my foot out the door, and then COVID came along and pushed me and closed the door behind me. But Tom and I, the whole time we were there, we were like, oh, we could do something like this, but it's not quite on brand. And we're both quite sustainably focused and minded. So we always wanted to use more sensible vehicles that still encouraged stopping and, forcing you to stop, but not having to force ourselves on other people. Mm-hmm. And it's something, we've always wanted to do. So we decided we'd try it, and we were flogging a dead horse for a good couple of years. We've got lots of ideas in the bag and lots of concepts and lots of trips almost ready to go. But Vietnam, that's kind of, it was in between COVID and Vietnam actually happening, that it was just, we were adrift and didn't really know how to pin it down. But that's how the journey was for me. I tried to go back into TV. Again, didn't enjoy it that much. And I spent the whole time while I was working in TV, researching things for Nerpa, which now that I'm working on it full time, I feel comfortable saying. But back then, I wouldn't have said a word. But yeah, that was my journey from there. And I realized I spoke over Tom at the start of that. So over to you, my love.
I think what we realized during our time with the Adventurists was, and I guess part of this is from listening to stories from the participants. Some of it is from the situations that we found ourselves in as event managers, was that the best stories, the best memories, the most fun always comes from, I guess, unexpected situations or sort of times when you find yourself somewhere and you're like, how did I get here? Is this going to end up all right? And then invariably it does. And those are the best stories. So that's the type of trip that I'd like to give people. I appreciate that's almost like saying, how do you bottle something that is spontaneous? It's very different. So in lieu of that, how do we do our best to curate the conditions that will allow that to play out? And yes, the participant has to take on some of the burden of that. And, what's to the riches the spoils? That's not the right expression, but you know what I'm trying to get at. So yeah, I guess that was it. And, me and Kev, like Kev was saying, we were lucky that we were friends first, colleagues second. So whilst we were both furloughed, we'd call each other up a few times a week and we'd chat through and be like, oh, what if you did something like this or something like this? And I think, it got to a point where, unfortunately, a lot of the team were let go during COVID, we were just like, why not us? Let's give it a go. Like we've got the skills. The worst thing that can happen is that it fails. And if it fails, we'll just work normal jobs, and that's cool.
Yeah. So in those conversations in that early time when you guys were kind of formulating this, I know that it was you had very intentional conversations about how you wanted to do things differently. And I just wonder if you could talk about that, what was it that you wanted to do differently? And can you kind of maybe package up and give us a summary of sort of the philosophy that came out of those discussions?
What we wanted to do differently was to use sustainable vehicles, local vehicles where possible, support local economies, because tourism can be quite an extractive thing. Work with local partners, pay fair living wage to anyone that we work with, and I guess make sure that we create the conditions whereby cultural exchange and being in a different society or a different place or with different people is not tokenistic, and doesn't rely on stereotypes or caricatures. It allows people to sort of see people on an eye-to-eye level and to have that sort of mutual respect, which sometimes can be missing especially from adventure travel, which quite often can be there can be quite a lot of machismo, and it's very much about the accomplishment of the completed journey itself, rather than the memories that were studied across that journey.
Yeah.
Which is what I really enjoy more.
So you mentioned culture. I just picked the quote on your website because it just kind of struck me. You guys said that culture is something that you experience, not look at. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in my last job working with young people who were doing international volunteering. So we used to teach a lot about, what is culture shock, how do we relate to culture? And, culture is sort of like a really difficult thing to pin down, but it's like the beliefs and understandings that sort of go to how a group of people express themselves. And I guess we sort of thought that, people go on trips abroad and they sort of have this. Quite often, a lot of the things that they will do that are considered culture, whether that be going to the Great Wall of China, or going to Machu Picchu, or if you're seeing a flamenco show or seeing local music, that is culture, but it's not really culture. That's a performative representation of an idea of a place. Versus, and in fact, I'm sorry, this is a bit of an aside. This is the best example of what I mean by culture. Is something that we experience. On the first Lost in Vietnam event that we organized, we had a really well thought out local musical performance for our participants. And they turned up, they had this gigantic speaker. She sang this, frankly, in my opinion, bizarre sort of opera music. There was sort of, like glass shattering. And the weird thing was, that the night before, after me and Kev had finished sort of set up for the day, we just walked down the street. We found a barbecue joint where you'd cook your own meat, and we got stuck talking to a bunch of 15 people, and then we were having drinks and we were chatting and we were communicating through Google Translate, and they wouldn't let us go until 2 a.m. And then when we reflected afterwards, we were just like, it would have been so much better if we just took over into the barbecue spot. Yeah. That's real fun. And I think that's if that is the end quote that encapsulates that quote.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great example. It really is. And hopefully listeners have kind of gotten a grasp here of what I've kind of have experienced with you guys, is just this sort of whole life journey. I mean, in the experiences that you guys have had, you've been developing this. And, when you're doing a long road trip and you find yourself in these little places, you get an opportunity to experience that. So, to me, it's just inherent in the experiences that you've had, but I'm curious if you could just kind of name it. What are some of the skills that you developed in your time before starting Nerpa that has sort of made this just a natural transition for you?
For me, in particular, it was exposure therapy. It was just being beaten down by paperwork, budgets, and having to deal with nearly 1,000 people every summer, all of who want you to listen to their story when they get to the finish line. You just need endless patience. And Tom and I worked out after a few years, our patience runs out with each other at about 7.5, 8 weeks. Then we'll have a passive aggressive argument, probably cry, and then carry on. But it's just being able to say hard no's is something that took a long time, and not being, I was accused regularly by management that I was being too nice to people. So not putting a guard up necessarily, but just being blunt and being able to communicate properly.
Yeah.
And bring someone around who speaks Russian. That helps when you're working in Russia.
I love it. Well, there's one skill right there that you didn't even know you were training for. But Tom, how about you?
I think patience is a really important one. Patience in the sense that there was a very big difference between working with a Peruvian partner versus working with a Moroccan partner. And especially when you haven't necessarily had much exposure to those two cultures, you have to sort of be cognizant of the fact that you are a guest in that country. That's not to say you let yourself be taken advantage of, which goes to Kev's point about having a guard up, but just understanding that this is not your world necessarily. The rules aren't as you experience them normally, so you have to sort of try and re-equilibrate yourself to those. This is going to sound really boring, but getting good at doing risk assessments is so important. The most of safety, due diligence, and I think in terms of those are the boring, hard skills. I think in terms of the actual soft skills is just trusting yourself that what you think is going to be a good trip is right. And I think that's something that's learned over time. And generally just believing this idea, it probably will work. This is why. And just going with it.
And there's another thing as well. There's something's always going to go wrong. And it's like, okay, well, no one's dead, so we're good. They've got one too few rooms in the hotel, or it's like, it really doesn't matter. It means that me or Tom will have to sleep in the next hotel over, or something like that. It's just, patience and just, it'll be fine. It'll work out. And that's the kind of trip that we want to sell, is we want to give people enough structure that they, feel safe and they feel well looked after. But then we also want to give them those little kind of micro adventures, which is why we're doing the day on, day off type experience. Because, you go on a group holiday and you're like, again, this person's quite annoying. So why don't we we'll do the other route so we can go and get some time by ourselves.
So let's jump into that, because now we're into Nerpa, right? And you guys have an awesome adventure that you've planned right now that you're working on called Lost in Vietnam. So, and this is kind of jumping into what you were just getting into, Kevin. Tell us about Lost in Vietnam.
So as I said earlier, over the years, we've had so many ideas. And one of the first ones that we were looking at from recollection was we were looking at getting longtail boats and traveling down the Mekong River. But we found a lady called Nadea Nabila she's the only person that makes electric versions of those longtail boats. If you've been to Southeast Asia, those boats are one of the most obviously Southeast Asian sounds that you'll hear. It's just that like diesel engine from miles away. Whereas the electric ones, I thought, imagine tearing down the Mekong with an electric motor. The landscape of the Mekong is incredible. It's everything you want out of it. But turns out, after thorough research, you can't legally ride boats as a tourist. So we looked into the next best thing and decided on Vietnam, and we had lots of ideas. And that's when we got in touch with Lost Travel, who are one of our kind of American partners, and brought them the idea and said we should do something together. They basically gave us the customers, we gave them the logistics, and met in the middle, and I think created something really unique and special in such a ridiculously cool country as well.
So kind of the elements of this trip that I'm picking up on, and I want you guys to add in here, but it seems that it's the e-bikes, you're on these electric bikes, right? And there's an element to it where there's structure, but like every other night, the guest is sort of on their own. And I think that's really, really unique. And I wonder if you can just kind of talk through sort of that structure element.
It's effectively, it's a 10-day trip, which is 2 blocks of 4 days of riding, which is sort of, and the juicy middle, so to speak, is the 2-day cave trek. The reason why we're doing sort of 2 blocks of riding is that, in our opinion, riding a motorbike 8-9 days on the bounce is can be a bit fatiguing and a bit samey. Whereas when you have your 2 blocks, you've got something to look forward to, a bit of a break, and you get back on. But I think, yeah, you're right. The whole, we've worked on events where it's, we'll see you at the start and we'll see you at the finish, and what you do in the middle is up to you. And some people really like that, and some people might really like that, but don't quite realize that yet. And some people really are only used to having, full hand-holding, more heavily itinerarized structure. I think we sort of decided that we want people to take the initiative to seek out those experiences and to really sort of force them to interact with local communities and sort of look for cheap hotels or funny places to eat. So it makes sense that doing a day on, day off accommodation is the sort of natural route. From a sort of a slightly more boring safety and logistics point of view, it means that if there are problems with the vehicles, which we're very certain there won't be, we can troubleshoot very quickly. We know where people roughly will be and we can get to them quickly, or if there's an emergency. I think most importantly, it means that another thing is that the way we design the route is that it almost gives you options to sort of, if you're getting from point A to point B, you have 2 or 3 different potential routes that you could take. And therefore the group will split off, create their own stories. As they come back together, they'll share those stories. Hopefully it'll create a more cohesive group because everyone wants to explain the little experience they had, or that pho restaurant they went to, or whatever the night they spent on someone's floor when they were charging the bike, or things like that. Yeah, I think it's the perfect structure for a trip for people who maybe don't think group trips are for them, but also maybe aren't quite ready yet to do the full unsupported type of adventure.
Hey everyone, it's Scott here. Did you know that the members of my real estate team, W Realty Group, are listening to their own voices that call to adventure by setting big goals? Some of those goals include planning trips to Bali and the Kingdom of Bhutan, buying investment homes, and running the Chicago Marathon. At W Realty Group, we support and encourage these big goals and want to help turn them into reality. We're currently looking to add new members to the team. If you know a great real estate agent in the Charlotte, North Carolina area that would benefit from being part of our team, please send a text, an email, or give me a call. And know that when you support W Realty Group, you're also supporting this podcast. Thanks for listening. It makes total sense. What's the size of the group that starts together?
Maximum 12. We don't do big groups.
Okay.
I think we want to know people's names. We want to be able to know people's siblings' names, what jobs they do, and we found we've organized trips for groups from 10 to 50 to 800. We just like small groups.
It makes sense. So you start out together, and then kind of every other day you're kind of coming back together as a group, but sort of on your own. And so what's sort of the expectation for people when they're on their own? What does that look like for somebody?
As Tom said, there's more often than not 2 or 3 options of where they could go that day. And our days aren't that long. I think the biggest day was 140, 150 kilometers. So that's like, if you're on one of those bikes, you could really get it done in like 4 hours if you really wanted to. But we just want them to take their time and not have to do those huge distances. So they'll have 2 entire days to do at most 300 kilometers.
Yeah.
In a car, you'd get that done in a few hours, but on the bike and the electric bike, you can stop, smell the roses. You can have conversations going, full throttle on those bikes, which for me, that's one of the best things about it is you actually hear things when you go past and you're not just on this vibrating monster. And I'm hoping because we are forcing people to take days off on their own, that it is a bit of a purge away from the group. It does give them time to gather those stories. And You know, I'm guessing that's why you started this podcast. All everyone wants to do who has traveled is have an ear. It does, you know, they feel great about the experience they've had, but they want to tell people about it. It's not
people about it for sure.
And that's why, you know, why we want to remember people's names. We want to remember the stories they had from the first night. So, yeah, we want to be able to be eager to hear these stories.
Right.
When the group gets too big, it's like, okay, you stayed in a hotel that had an uncomfortable bed. Amazing. You know, it's one of those things it's quite a tough sell. But if the group is small and you know them and give them that space to create their own adventure while also herding them in the right direction, everyone's safe, everyone's going to have a great story, and they're not going to get sick of each other. That's the outcome I'm hoping for anyway.
Because we keep the relative distance quite short, it means that we can happily tell people, if you see a dirt road, or if you see a side track, or if you see a sign for what looks like it could be a national monument, you've got the time. Like no one on this trip, hopefully, is feeling like they're trying to race the clock, race the sunset, or feel pressured that they have gone through this trip at a pace that meant they couldn't go slow and enjoy themselves. And I think that's why the charging aspect of it is so important, that they can charge for 2 hours and just exist in a place before they get back on the bike and then go to the next place to exist.
Yeah, I love that.
That's kind of where it takes the influence from, you know, rather than use crappy vehicles, we're using well-made, well-established vehicles that encourage breaks.
Yeah.
And you need to look after your bike, keep it topped up. You know, you're going to be drinking all the Vietnamese coffee and having all the pho, but you just need to make sure every time you stop, the plug goes in. And more often than not, when you show up with a bike that's electric, they're like, what is this? Come and eat. Yeah, come in here.
And then they find out it's Vietnamese, and they're like, what? Vietnamese bike? And you're like, yeah, of course. Yeah.
And this is the experience of culture that we were just talking about, which is so cool. One of the signatures of this trip is this cave trek. Tell us about the cave trek that you kind of put in the middle of the sandwich.
Well, that is why we changed the route, really. Instead of going from Ho Chi Minh to Da Nang, we were like, right, we'll start in Hoi An, because missing these caves when you're in Vietnam is, I mean, we didn't do it last time, and I feel like a complete moron for not going up there. It's the third largest cave in the world. We're paying a little bit of a premium, but because only 16 people can camp there per night. So we thought we'd buy the whole group. So it was just us in this cave in the middle of the jungle that has its own weather system. An aeroplane can fit in there. Wow. It has a beach inside the jungle. So for us, it was a bit of a no-brainer. And it does split, you know, it cuts the trip into two halves, and you have the same accommodation 2 nights. You don't have to see your bike. You know, it will stay at the hotel, it will get cleaned up, charged, and everything's going to be running okay when you get back to it. But yeah, it just seemed like a no-brainer to miss those
excited.
things.
I want to do this trip.
Always room for a little one, my man. Always room.
It sounds amazing. So when is the next Lost in Vietnam trip? And if people want to find out more about this trip, how can they do that?
Yeah, December 3rd to December 13th, 2026. And then we are just about to put on sale, it will be end of March 2027. So I think something like the 29th of March to the 11th of April. Don't quote me on this.
You got two options available, yeah. Great. On your website, I wanted to just touch on, you have another sort of event or type of trip or something that you call One Night Local. And I just wondered if you could talk about what that is.
That kind of inspired the funding that we received. It was on our trip in Wales on the mountain bikes, you know, on our first dinner, Tom and I were giving them a bit of a spiel about Wales. And we were like, there's one thing we're going to try on this trip, and it's get you a lock-in. I'm not sure. Have you heard that phrase before?
Tell me what it means.
So a lock-in is when the bar owner locks the door behind you in a pub. Rules are off. Curtains close, door is locked. There's a glass on the table with cash in it. That is a rural UK pub. That's what happens. Quite difficult to find and get hold of unless you are a local. And somehow on the first night after bigging up the lock-in experience. We ended up getting a lock-in in this small Welsh town, and the guys were just completely over the moon. And it was an experience they've never received before because they're so used to staying in 5-star hotels and, you know, the white glove service. This was, we're going to chuck you on some bikes into the mountains, and then at the end of that day, you're going to meet John, who's got one tooth at the bar, you know, and you're going to drink whiskey with him until neither of you can anymore. And it was off that experience of a lock-in that has inspired the one night local experience, which is it's a higher end product. And we've got a one night local Wales coming up in September, and then a one night local Thailand in October. So our one night local experience, I'm not sure in Wales, I'm not sure how much you want to talk about this, Tom.
The thing is with the one night local is that the whole trip is sort of, like Kev said, it's quite comfortable. It's very nice. It's got the type of things that we wanted to show that highlight local history, local traditions, the finer side of things, good golf, great food. And then within that broader week-long trip, we don't say when, we keep the suspense sort of bubbling. There is this very, very visceral, very sort of chaotic, hyper-local experience that you couldn't possibly get without knowing someone and how to do it. Yeah. So the Wales one, I don't want to give too much away, but it's like a rite of passage into South Wales. Sometimes it makes us laugh because we think about our sort of our main investors, and they're three lovely, lovely guys. And we just think, oh God, wouldn't it be funny if they did this? And then that becomes the sort of kernel around which we'll build out the one night local experience.
Yeah.
So yeah, we keep it secret because we don't want to spoil the surprise. We sort of have the tagline like create the stories that you'll dine out on for years.
Yes.
It really is. It's turned up to 11.
I love the mystery on it. And you guys have done a great job with your website. So I want to encourage listeners to hit nerpatravel.com to check out more and find out what are your hopes and dreams going forward, guys?
For me, I think I've still got the wildlife bug in me. So I'd love to eventually end up doing a one night local or a sustainable safari type experience. That for me, an excuse to go and see cool animals
Very
sustainably cool. And, you know, have a really interesting cultural experience while you're there. Yeah. That's the dream for me.
How about you?
We've got these mad dreams for being able to really support local communities by assisting with, you know, off-grid or sustainable energy production, whether that's a co-funded model, a crowdfunded model, direct support, but doing it in a sort of solidarity-based way rather than a charity-based way. I would love to get to a point where we can start saying X amount of our profits are going to go help this community to build, you know, this small-scale hydro turbine, or they're going to, you know, electrify this with solar panels, and, you know, our customers can contribute to this crowdfunder to do it. So that would be what I'd like to get to. I mean, I would love to earn the UK's median salary at some point. But
there you go. Well said. Well, listen, if people want to find out more, travel with you, what advice do you have for people? You've got a great website.
Yeah, nerpatravel.com. Obviously, we're on Instagram, Nerpa Travel. We're very lucky that our name doesn't come up too much unless you're searching for an obscure Russian seal. And yeah, if you want to learn more, you can contact us. The email is hello@nerpatravel.com. Yeah, that's it. That's the best ways, I think.
You didn't tell us about the name. Why Nerpa Travel?
So finished line in the Mongol Rally in Russia, in the city called Ulan-Ude. Next to Ulan is Lake Baikal, which is the world's largest lake. It's got 20% of the world's unfrozen freshwater. It's like a mile deep. In the lake lives the world's only endemic freshwater seal. Am I right, Kev? Yes. And it's called the Nerpa in Russian. Unsurprising. And when me and Kev was throwing around ideas for names for what we'd call this company, I think we went through about 20 iterations of really, I guess, sort of unimaginative, eco-y, green, travel-y adventure stuff. And someone just said, what about Nerpa? Like, we used to work next to it. It's meaningful to us in the sense that, you know, it harkens back to how what our origin story is. And it just sounds like a cool skate brand word. And
The Nerpa seal. I love it.
They're water-based, land-based. If you throw them hard enough, they're air-based. So, it's
everything.
where it doesn't limit us to just land.
It's great. I love it. I love it. You guys have lived such an epic life. I love what you're doing. I love that you're sharing this with the world. But everything that you guys have done up to this point, it's just epic. So many different adventures. And it's just this bringing together of all these different experiences. At some point, Hollywood is going to hear about your story and they're going to want to make a movie about you. And when
I think we need slightly more charisma for that.
No, you guys have it going on. I want to know who's going to be the Hollywood actors that are going to play you guys in your movie.
Oh, well, we get likened to Mario and Luigi. I'm quite squat and wide. Tom is tall and slender, and we both have mustaches. And Tom is actually wearing dungarees right now, it looks like. So we're pretty much there.
It's a Mario and Luigi adventure. Oh my God, I love that so much. What's the movie going to be called?
Oh, God. I thought, judging from some of the questions earlier on, because of the epilepsy and the crazy business, it was going to be Convulsions and Chaos, played by Jack Black, which is, I've been likened to Jack Black since I grew any facial hair whatsoever. I like the Mario and Luigi theme, though.
Convulsions and Chaos, starring Mario and Luigi. I mean, that's an Oscar winner right there. I think that's going to be like the summer blockbuster movie. I'm so excited. Guys, this has been so much fun. Thank you for sharing your energy with me. Thank you for sharing your time with me today. And for those listening, I hope you've been inspired today as much as I have. Hope Tom and Kevin's story has encouraged you to listen to the voice inside that calls you to adventure, because we want to hear your story next. If you have a story to tell or just need a nudge to create one, please send me an email. We'd also appreciate it if you'd help us spread the word by leaving a review and sharing or tagging Inspire Campfire in your social media. And until next time, I want to encourage you to get outside. Thanks for listening. Tom, Kevin, thank you guys so much for being here.
Right back at you. Thank you, man.
So much for having us.
Pleasure.